Let's start at the end of the story. I've been a follower of Jesus for a little over 40 years, and I feel like the journey has barely begun. In some ways, I'm excited, because only now am I starting to understand my limits, to know what I don't know, to accept that what I used to think of as certainty was really just ignorance, varnished with arrogance. I'm excited because I sense that only now can my journey with Jesus really begin. Now that I've tossed overboard the ballast of my own pride and assumptions and mistaken affiliations and ambitious plans. Yeah, I'm excited. But after 40-some years, the excitement is muted by something else. Weariness. I've been striving for so long, plowing ahead on my own steam, struggling to construct a life of faith as a man, as a husband and then a father, as a professional creative in an environment where some religious beliefs are viewed with open suspicion, as a citizen with political responsibilities in a disastrously divided world, and ultimately realizing I've done a good bit of it really, really badly. So I'm not tired. Tired is how a person feels after they've done something hard but ultimately worthwhile, something that mattered, something that was worth it. 40-some years in, I'm not tired. I'm weary. Weary is what a person feels after they've spent a tremendous amount of energy and realized it was pointless, maybe even counterproductive. Weary is what a person feels when they realize they have to tear down the very things they worked so hard to build. Weary is when you've demolished everything back down to the foundation, and now you're just too exhausted and uncertain to even think about starting to build again. Is this God's plan? Is this what we were put here to do? Can I be forgiven for thinking that alongside the hope that my journey with God is finally really about to begin, it all feels a little, too late? Just a little bit pointless? A chasing after the wind? I don't mean to brag, but I've come to be certain of a lot of things throughout my life. Beginning when I was quite a bit younger, in fact. You could say I was kind of a prodigy of worldly wisdom. For instance, starting way back in my teens, I knew that Coke was better than Pepsi. McDonald's was better than Burger King. I knew that parachute pants would be cool for absolutely ever, and that mullets would never go out of style. I was a font of wisdom, you might say. I was absolutely certain of my politics, my denomination, my version of the Bible, and how the end times were going to occur. But then, something happened. Time happened. And with time came something unexpected. Uncertainty. Bit by bit, most of my worldly wisdom eroded away. The answers I had been so sure of increasingly became, I don't know. A lot of the banners I had rallied behind, so many of the flags I'd flown, most of the tribes I had found meaning and purpose in joining, I eventually found them to be flawed, broken, blind, and human. My quest for wisdom was a long, complicated journey of accumulation, followed by systematic, occasionally painful, always disappointing, pruning, until I found I was kind of right back to where I started. Wisdom. It's the one thing that the Bible promises. If you ask for it, God will give it. Maybe the problem is I just don't recognize true wisdom when I see it. Is wisdom less about having all the answers and more about knowing what questions really matter? My answer to that is the only answer that I can give honestly these days. I just don't know. Indulge me. This is my success story. I'm a consummate creative. Besides helping create 2 kids, my other creations, books, games, films, have won awards, earned a worldwide audience, and achieved global press. It's a pretty good success story. And none of it is good enough. All of it, every single moment of victory, adulation, and success, it all wore off so quickly as to be instantaneous. It wasn't what I needed. I needed to write the next bestseller. I needed to make an Oscar-winning feature film. I needed, in short, to use the skills and talents God gave me to change the world. And so I'm not content. I'm the opposite of content. I have existential claustrophobia. I now know that success is fleeting. It's never enough. And yet, I am still a slave to it. I still yearn for nothing less than to use my God-given abilities to change the world. Arrogant? Of course. I'm a creative. I'm a paragon of ego wherever I'm not crippled with insecurity. So I take all of this regularly to God. I whine and complain about why I haven't been able to change the world in His name. I was doing this recently while out on a walk, and a thought came into my head, maybe from God. If you had written that bestseller, or gotten that film contract, or sold that game idea, what would have happened? Well, I'd have been on a promotional tour, or scouting locations, or leading a team of developers somewhere. And God seemed to say to me, so if you'd gotten your wish, if I had answered your prayers the way you wanted me to, you wouldn't have been here, doing your first best job, being papa to those 2 kids I gave you. Instead of going on a book tour, you were reading them stories. Instead of filming on locations, you were taking them to parks. Instead of chasing dreams, you were leading devotions, and wrestling, and having picnics, and going on bike rides. You wanted to change 1 million hearts in some small way. What I gave you was 2 hearts to grow and mold and love in a huge, permanent, irreplaceable way. And I walked away from that revelation, well, I'm still kind of disgruntled, but grudgingly grateful, because I do love this job best of all, and I'd hate to have missed it. So that's my success story. It isn't what I expected it to be, but it also isn't over yet. Will it be worth it in the long run? Will I ever get it right? Or in the end, will all of my success and dreams and boundless ambitions just be vanity? Confession time. I'm a hedonist by nature. I don't know if this is related or not, but one of my girlfriends nicknamed me the Cat in the Hat. Maybe because I sort of live by one of his quotes. It's fun to have fun, but you have to know how. Suffice it to say, when it comes to fun, I know how. People say to me, you really know how to do self-care, how to prioritize your needs, how to make time for you. And I just think, you mean being selfish with my time, indulgent in my passions, and never saying no to myself is a virtue? I like this new normal. But I have noticed something. Every indulgence comes with a price. There isn't any pleasure that won't eventually turn into poison. Now, a smart person would develop some discipline around this idea. They'd learn when to say when. They'd understand that the best attitude toward the pleasures of life is moderation. But I don't usually know where that boundary is, where the indulgence goes from pleasure to poison. I do know that, as great as any earthly pleasures are, they are never enough to really satisfy. They tease that they can. They promise that real satisfaction is always in the next bite, the next drink, or the next sensation. And it never is. All there is the cost, the consequence, the downside. Every good thing in this world, they all overpromise and underdeliver. Hedonist that I am, I have learned that every pleasure has to be said no to long before it can provide the satisfaction it promises. So, what's the point in being the cat in the hat? What if none of us really knows how to have fun? Because pleasure itself is a false promise. I don't have any answers. And so, for better or worse, I mostly just try not to think about it. I focus instead on the few things I can be sure of. Like, cherry pie is really good. The following is a true story. A voice once spoke to me when I was alone in a cemetery. I was on my bike riding through some random countryside that I'd never explored before, and I came across this old, isolated cemetery up on a hill. Now, I've been fascinated by graveyards ever since I was a kid. So, of course, I got off my bike and unplugged my headphones and wandered around. Like most such places, this cemetery was quiet, somber, yet strangely pastoral and even cheerful in the midday summer sun. There was no one around for miles. Then, as I was standing looking down at a particularly old marker, a random name and set of dates from some life long past, a voice spoke up clearly and unmistakably right next to me. I'll never forget the words. The voice said,
"In 300 feet, turn right onto County Road 140.
True story. It was my phone, of course, giving me directions. In reality, death, I think, is always speaking to us. I don't prefer to attend much to it, and who can blame me? But death has ways of making itself heard. It intrudes on our sunny summer walk through life. It shows up through the march of time on those around us, or unexpectedly in tragic and heartbreaking ways. Death speaks up, just like that day in the graveyard. And just like that day, it seems like death gives directions. Maybe it says, take the long view instead of the short view. Maybe it says, remember that this life isn't all there is. Or turn right or left from that habit or attitude or relationship. Or maybe it just says, wake up for a minute and pay attention. I don't usually want to be reminded of death. I don't want to remember that this life is ultimately, in many ways, tragic. And yet, behind all of the loss, I do wonder if the direction death points us to is ultimately a place of hope. We're just not there yet. If we listen close enough, I think death tells us, in a few days, or decades, or hours, turn up. Let's talk baseball. It'll come as no surprise that I'm not a really huge sports fan. But there's this one thing that happens in baseball. It's so common that it's become kind of a trope. It's when an outfielder is trying to catch a fly ball, straining to watch it, and he gets blinded by the stadium lights or the sun. It happens all the time. I can't show any footage of it because of express written consent, but it looks kind of like this. There's a phrase for it. It's called losing it in the lights. Why do I bring this up? Because for the past 5 weeks, I've been questioning what matters in this life, asking the big question, what's the point? Work and wisdom and ambition and pleasure, they are part of the point, and I think God wants me to enjoy them. The problem comes when I try to make them the whole point, when I expect them to fulfill a promise that they can never really satisfy. So allow me to make a little note to self. Maybe it'll be of some benefit to you as well. Don't be so obsessed with those rare, fleeting moments of euphoria and ecstasy. God is always sending you little pop flies of happiness, joy, and contentment. Don't lose them in the lights. Don't be so blinded by ambition and striving and the quest for those mountaintop experiences that you miss out on those small moments of joy that pop up every day. A bike ride, an all too rare hug from your teen daughter, a fresh cup of coffee, an unexpected laugh, a piece of cherry pie, a moment of rest. Don't lose it in the lights. And don't forget, this life isn't all there is. What this means for me is a promise from the God who is good and who loves me. The promise? That every one of those fleeting little moments of joy are symbols of an ultimate joy that is yet to come. So the point is deceptively simple. Carry on. Store up hope. Walk the road. Keep the faith for however long I have left here under the sun.